Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Greg Burge, and I am the owner and principal of Collaborative Partnering Services. And I will be your host for this segment of a worldwide standard for collaborative business relationships, also known as ISO 44001. As an original member of the United States Technical Advisory Group, also known as TAG, ISO 44001 guides business collaborating around the world because countries around the world shaped the standard as an active working framework. Today's segment features a special guest, John Thorson, to reinforce that point. And John, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Greg. Thanks you. Well, I'm a business manager at NCC Construction. We work in the Nordic countries. I represent. That's what I do for a living. NCC works in all the Nordic countries with about $5 billion turnover, 17,000 employees in construction industry and property development, and been around for about 100 years. They were thoughtful enough to put me in a position where I could take the lead of a Swedish technical committee called 593 that was able to work with ISO 44001 and the following standards there. So I'm chairing the technical group in Sweden, working with the standards family around 44001.
Wow. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm glad I referred you as our special guest. So thanks so much. So I think most of us would like to know what led the Swedish construction industry to seriously investigate the standard ISO 44001.
I guess, like in any industry, there have been a lot of productivity reports over the years. I've studied the UK ones, the Latham report and the Egan report back in the 90s. We had a small productivity report come out in 2013. It said, well, basically everything of importance in 444 completed projects that they investigated had a lower score if those projects have ticked the box for this is a collaborative project. And the construction tabloids were pretty quick to pick that up. They boosted it with headlines like partnering, not a success. And the company I work for, NCC Construction, we had introduced and really pushed for integrated collaborative partnering in the Swedish construction industry for about 10 years at this point. And our results were quite the opposite. In everything that we measured for those past 10 years, we had been seeing better results in client satisfaction, in our employee satisfaction, and even when it comes to how you manage time, how you manage costs, and even the money you make was better in the collaborative projects. So given our collaborative ethos and reputation, the papers before publishing this, they called us up and asked for a comment. And we had two ways to go. And this is what really what triggered our search for and then commitment to ISO 44001. We had two ways to go with this report. Either you shoot it down and say they compare apples with pears and even with strawberries, or so many things you could look at in this report that they hadn't when it comes to collaborative working. Or you could just embrace it and tell it like it is, that getting a collaborative initiative to work, like is bloody hard. And it takes commitment from all the parties involved and a lot of effort. You can't just change the heading in a procurement document in order to get more bids and expect a collaborative result. So those were our problems at the time. That's really where we were. So that report from 2013 really forced us to take a look at our way of, working collaboratively in the industry. It doesn't help if NCC gets great results in their collaborative venture when the some others do as well. But when a large portion of the market doesn't get those results, that is never going to work.
Got it. Wow. So something lit the fire. It sounds like something lit the fire in you guys.
It did. It did. And the public clients had been working with collaborative partnering and seeing the same results we've been seeing over the past 10 years. They were equally, frustrated with this report, but there was a full 2-page almost advert next week in the same magazine saying, no, partnering is something really good and collaborative working is the real way forward. We just need to find the framework for it. And that's what sparked our interest in collaborative working through ISO 44001.
Yeah, good for you. So, did either the industry owners or the builders, were they really, uh, you know, really also set the fire for you to help along the way, or did both do it?
Well, we'll see. NCC at the time, I was going to say it was both were involved in it, but
Mm-hmm.
NCC, the construction company, when you look at the history of collaborative working between client and main contractor, in Sweden it was driven by the market or by NCC as the main one of the three large contractors in Sweden. You got Skanska, you got NCC, and you got Peab, and together we have the majority of the construction market in Sweden, believe it or not. We were looking in back in the early 2000s. We were taking something that worked well in all the other Nordic countries where we were working, and we were implementing those things in the other parts of NCC. And we got in our labs collaborative working or partnering from the Danish construction side, and said, try and implement this in Sweden. And that was a big change from both Denmark and in the UK, where government actually took the initiative and said, if you want to use government funding, you better work collaboratively, otherwise you won't get any money, right?
Okay.
So it grew very slowly in Sweden, I would say. So from one or two contractors really pushing it into the market. And we were trying at this point, 2013, to really get to figure out, me and the Nordic partnering manager, my boss at the time at NCC, we were looking at a way to keep our market leading position when it came to collaborative partnering and to find that next step. And we sort of realized that everyone benefits from more people and more organizations being proficient at collaborative working. So how can we help build internal capabilities for collaboration, in long-term internal capabilities, instead of a lot of both clients and contractors being reliant on individual consultants for guidance, or for, we can only work collaboratively when we have a consultant telling us what to do and how to do it.
Yeah.
So we looked outside of Sweden, and we were already familiar with IPI, the International Partnering Institute over there in California, and really liked what they were doing. Building that whole structure for collaborative partnering, starting from the steering group and top management, and involving your building a collaborative partnering program, involving your supply chain was something that we'd already been looking into the few years earlier. But we also found in the UK that they'd been starting with this BS 11,000, a British standard for collaborative working, a framework. And we invited them over to Sweden to see if we could learn from them, see what information and training they had. And we even made a gap analysis on our own management system, and it looked really, really poor. We were far from the AAA in maturity that you would want to be at that point. So we got the Swedish NCC executive team and the NCC group executive team to give thumbs up to follow that through. And at that time, BS 11,000 was being elevated into an ISO structure. And if we want to go for a certification, possibly in a British standard, an ISO standard, what would be best? And then we decided ISO obviously was the better choice. And we waited for about a year for it to mature and come out. We didn't know at that time that it was going to take how many years? I think they worked at it for until 2017 before it came out. So we waited a year, and then we just said, let's do this. Let's go in and see if we can contribute to the work. And that's when we, NCC in that case, me and my boss at the time, Stefan, we took we went to the Swedish Institute for Standards, and through them invited everyone that we knew in the industry. And the CEO of the Clients Association, in the Construction Clients Association in Sweden, he was really quick to realize the potential for his members. And he's held the seat of vice chairman ever since, from the start. We got consultants in, we got the National Transport Administration in, we even have a professor from Chalmers and the Royal Institute of Technology on the committee, and even one of the leading law firms that have worked a lot with collaborative contracting. So they joined early, and they helped develop the standard from a Swedish perspective.
Oh, that is great. Good for you.
We drove it together in the industry. I was going to say, from an initiative by us.
A collaborative answer. Very nice.
It's true. But it wasn't a very nice thought from the beginning. It was just us trying to keep our market leading position.
Uh, you got to start somewhere. So,
You did.
when do you believe that the ISO standard is not recommended?
I was going to say it would be, it does apply to any organization who wants to build a readiness or capability to identify, prepare, and execute on collaborative initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
But we've realized that, for that being said, micro businesses, small businesses, medium-sized enterprises will most likely find this management system a bit heavy, or a bit, bureaucratic would probably be a good choice of word here.
Mm-hmm.
And may not see the immediate use of it to deliver in a collaborative relationship. So, but we have acknowledged that in the international committee, the TC 286 ISO committee, and are working with ISO 44003 and ISO 44004 to help bridge that gap.
Okay, great.
Well, yeah, it applies to anyone, but it's hard to really address if you're a company working, based on your own head, like the CEO's own head is the operating model for the company.
Timing plays a part in this, I gather.
Timing,
Depending on,
size.
yeah. So where have you heard that the standard resonates with the construction industry in other countries?
I was going to say it originated from the UK, right? It's based on a British standard to start with, and to my knowledge, it's resonated in all of those. Probably not the politically correct to say, but all in the is the Commonwealth a well used word over there? I don't know. In the
Okay.
What do you call it when you use it in the old British Empire states or government?
Commonwealth works for me.
All right, so it's spread throughout the Commonwealth, obviously,
Okay.
through that. I know some of it applies to any industry, right? So you can use it whether or not you're in national air traffic services, or trying to direct all the airplanes landing and taking off from Heathrow, like NATS, who was an early adopter of the standard. But it also works for construction really well in construction. And if you look at those companies who helped fund and start the Institute for Collaborative Working, from where the British standard originally originates, there are a lot of construction companies in there, like Skanska, Babcock, Kier, Network Rail, Costain, a lot of big contractors and clients.
Great. How about the Nordic countries?
We are the early adopter in the Nordic region. That would be Sweden, and I know there are some tech firms over in Finland who are trying to use it as well. But I would say Sweden has been the most active in the international committee, and also the first ones to really get those early examples of application. And it's fun. It's a lot of contractors who are using it to run through their systems, and build their capability, their collaborative maturity as an organization, both develop their organizational, build it into their organizational mindset, why it's good for business to collaborate and where you need to collaborate to add business value. And they help adopt their processes to align with that business idea. And then they also make sure to know who they have on board and their collaborative competence, I would say. So it helps develop your processes and your people.
Well, I think the idea being that, as it becomes more evident in their culture, it's very refreshing. It's like we actually made a difference.
Yeah, that's right. And it makes a difference for those construction companies that, are closest to me, but also I was going to say a lot of the public clients have been starting using it in their tendering. And they've asked for, whenever there's a public procurement out there for a contract, basically it's been mostly used for that relationship between client and contractor, not so much in the supply chain yet. We haven't seen a lot of those applications in Sweden yet. So more or less client contractor, that's where we're seeing the biggest application. And they started using the whole idea of the joint relationship management plan, building that into their procurement, saying we will want to evaluate your relationship management plan, and then once you're selected, we will together build a joint relationship management plan to, and match it with ours.
Hmm.
And I was just great. I got the committee that I'm chairing here in Sweden. We got an email from a local contractor who was trying to answer one of these, and he said, well, I don't really get this. Why should we answer step 1 to 4 in the 8-stage model, 8 operations? Those are all just for the client. We only step in and working together once we win the contract. And that made it so evident. They don't really evaluate their collaborative partner, the one inviting them to the table. They need to look at their own this contractor would need to, work through their own business model. Why do we want to collaborate? Do we have the capability? Do we have the maturity internally? And does the client really, who's asking us to collaborate, do we believe that they are collaborative, that they will be able to be collaborative? If we don't, if we come to the conclusion in our assessment, then we better step away from that project. But they didn't. Just jumped on everything.
Yeah.
And that pinpointed where you could really put the standard to good use. It opens up people's thinking to making sure that they're a match with their partner, not just that it's a job like any other job.
Yeah, that's a great story. So, do you have, for companies that really standards are important to them, how does the ISO 44001 relate to other standards that have come out of this committee?
Did I send you a slide where we could look at perhaps? Oh yeah, there it is. Thank you so much.
There it is.
I put this together for my committee just to show how the whole 44,000 suite fits together. So we produced the ISO 44001, right? That's the requirement standard and the framework. It's 130 plus requirements that you need to fulfill in order to get a certificate on the wall. Then at the same time, or just after that, we produced 44,002 that includes the guidance to each and every requirement in the standard. Then you'll get it's numbered in this exactly same way. Obviously 44,002 was a bit thicker because it's more or less the manual on how to operate 44,001.
Yeah.
Why is this requirement here? What's the use of this requirement? And what's the intent? What's the benefit? And how can I go about to meet this requirement as a suggestion, right? Not a requirement in itself. So that's 44,001 and 44,002. Those are both published. But if we move to the left in this picture, you can see ISO 44,000 to the very left. That's sort of a base plate for all of the other standards in this family. And 44,000 is a principles document. You might recognize ISO 9000 as more or less a similar document for quality management system. Mm-hmm. It's more or less 12 principles for collaborative business relationship management that will permeate that would permeate all the other standards, and you can use them more or less like putting on your glasses when reading the other standards so you can read it clearly. If you start with ISO 44,000, you will understand each and every requirement in the standard. So almost like zooming out and seeing the whole picture before you go in and start dissecting what the standard actually tells you to do. Mm-hmm. And we've used the principles as a base for developing the ISO IEC 17021-12. That's the competence requirements for auditing and certification. We haven't provided a certified, what do you call it, an accredited order of certification yet in the international arena, but it will likely come. We're trying to do one locally in Sweden now, but we've prioritized putting up the competence requirements for the ones doing the audit instead. And because just complying to a checklist and having the skills to assess what's important to comply with a checklist are two different things. And I prefer looking at the competence required first before we produce that checklist. 44,003 is the next number in the series. Mm-hmm. Moving up, I made a little picture at the bottom there in the white with a red square around it. 44,003 is um, helping micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to introduce the principles for collaborative working. Like I talked about before, they might be, the standard itself might be too heavy for the 4001. Just working with the principles, 12 principles, and applying them to your business might actually do all the necessary, might get you all that necessary development that you need. And you can use it either from a small company wanting to work with a large company, between one-to-one small companies, or you can actually use them in a cluster. Like I remember this talking about the North Italy, you would go 5 or 6 small companies would come together in order to produce one furniture for IKEA, being one of those large companies, obviously, right?
Yeah.
In a cluster. And 44003 can be applied in all of those scenarios. And then we made ISO 44004 as that will be a guidance to large organizations on how to apply collaborative business relationship management with small companies. So instead of, to really get their agility and their quick-footedness and not stamp on them and crush them under their heavy bureaucracy and everything it might entail.
Right.
So those are basically the standards we're working on right now. The red ones are published and the blue ones are undergoing development at the moment.
Great. Oh, this is.
Could I just add also, Greg? Sorry to not even let you speak a second here.
Sure.
I just wanted
Go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that ISO 44001 is a management system standard, right? So it follows the Annex SL, that higher level structure that you would find identical to ISO 9001 for quality and ISO 14001 for environment. So those, and then you got ISO 44001 following the exact same structure with senior leadership, with the governance structure for support and planning, performance evaluation, continuous improvements, and then you got Chapter 8 with operations, how to deploy a single initiative for collaborative working.
Yeah, I was just going to say this visual is very helpful.
I'm glad to hear it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, how would you recommend someone that's interested in learning more, what their next step should be?
Well, I would say that to contact one of you guys in the American committee. That would be my number one, because I love talking to people instead of, well, not just talking at people, actually talking with people normally when I'm not in one of these chats. But phone one of you guys up, or even contact us in Sweden. Just remember, we have an 8 or 9 hour time difference, but depending on when in the world we're calling.
Right.
So don't call in the middle of the night. We're more than happy to help. And otherwise, I would actually recommend people to go on to the instituteforcollaborativeworking.com. instituteforcollaborativeworking.com is a great pool to just dwell in. And one of those, if you don't want to read the standard per se, if you're not a standards person, you might want to check up some background information. And I would actually recommend reading David E. Hawkins' book. He's a chief operating officer of ICW. It's called Raising the Standard for International Collaboration, I believe, something like that.
Okay.
I would pick that book up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm always happy to get information and questions from folks. This has been really interesting, and I certainly appreciate all your time and energy on behalf of everyone working on the ISO committee from the United States. Thank you so very much for your time and for your enlightening us on how someone might want to get more involved with using a standard to help have a successful project. And I'm going to ask everyone out there to please stay tuned for an upcoming segment of this series. And by all means, please either tweet me at Gregory Burge, GregoryBurge, or you're welcome to email me on Gregory Burge at netbusiness.com. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, and have a great day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.